Hey, Erin.
Thanks for having me to your home to talk about health coaching.
It's my pleasure.
Well, I'm excited to pick your brain about it because I think you're a pioneer in health coaching. So I'd love to know what sort of was the impetus for you to follow your passion and get into this line of work.
Well, you know how much I like evolution, and I look at everything we do through the lens of evolution. My getting to become the founder of the Primal Health Coach Institute, for instance, was part of an evolution that's continuing. Started with my participation as an athlete in the 1960s and 1970s when I was competing in endurance contests. Was always interested in information I needed to enhance my performance. So was it training differently, training harder, shifting the days off that I elected to take? Was it what I was eating? Was it the supplements that I wasn't taking? And so I started really delving deeply at a personal level into my own performance when I was in my teens and throughout college, and then thereafter when I was competing on the circuit as an elite marathoner and later on as a triathlete. I kept looking for these sort of secrets, that they call them hacks today. I don't like that term that much, but that's what they call them. And I really dug deeply into the research, whether it was diet, whether it was training techniques, meditation, the whole gamut of health and wellness and fitness. And throughout my competitive years, I benefited from that information, and I started to see results from, the science that I was reading and ways in which I could alter my diet to improve my performance, or ways in which I could cut back on my training and actually race better. When I retired from competition, I started coaching. I think a lot of athletes find that that's sort of, again, a natural evolution. I started coaching elite athletes at first, and I had great success with elite athletes. I was training one of the top triathlon teams in the world. We traveled around the world, raced together. It was a fantastic time. When that ended, I started to shift more into coaching and training average citizens, right? And whether it was people who wanted to become a triathlete and wanted to know how I did it, how had I done it and what would I do to coach them, or whether it was a housewife looking to lose weight, or an elderly man looking to reduce the amount of pain and discomfort in his life. All the things over the years that I had picked up through my research and through my writing, by then I'd written several books, I started implementing my training program, and lo and behold, I became one of those first sort of iconic coaches to the stars in the 1980s, in the early 1980s. That was a very interesting time because, there was a mindset about aerobics of interest in those days. There was, a focus on a complex carbohydrate diet, in order to fuel all of the work that you had to do in the gym. And there was an assumption that the more work you did, the better the results would be. No pain, no gain. So, over the years, my evolution into what has become the Primal Health Coach Institute and the Primal Health Coach certification has evolved to incorporate sort of the greatest hits of all the things that I learned and put them into a life way and a template that I think anybody, any coach, could understand, could use in their own coaching practice, and then on top of that, because I've had some experience as an entrepreneur, I've added some business building components to the program.
Awesome. It's interesting because I think a lot of health coaches, myself included, come to health coaching from almost a place of frustration because the conventional wisdom around health just failed over time. It worked until it stopped working. But yours came from a place of performance, which I think is a compelling story because not everybody has a dramatic health transformation.
Right.
We get a lot of that questions from aspiring coaches. I haven't lost 100 pounds. I didn't cure my diabetes or whatever. How can I help people? But there is a market for, you put yourself out there as a high performance coach. And to your point, the housewife still came and found you. The aging men still came and found you. Like, it's how you put yourself out there. In a compelling way, your story you can have any backstory and people will still.
I think that's one of the most important elements to understand as an individual coach in this world is that you have a unique skill set. Your personality is part of that. Your interest level in areas of your expertise is part of that. So you could be interested in in athletes primarily, or you could be interested in postmenopausal women. You could be interested in training children. You could be interested. I mean, there's so many different aspects to coaching, and all of it's relevant. So a lot of this comes down to where your interests are and how you put yourself out there. So that's a good point. So I put myself out there as a coach to elite athletes, and yet over the decades, I don't work with elite athletes at all, ever anymore. It's almost the opposite. Now I work with people who are really frustrated at the lack of results that they've gotten from following traditional conventional wisdom in the medical community and even in the fitness community. So, I think everybody ought to experience this kind of aha moment that I had, which is, there is no one goal down the road. There's one that you can see now, but what you eventually arrive at looks sometimes, quite often, nothing like what you had in mind in the first place. I was always going to be a doctor. That was my dream as a child, and that was my training in college. I was pre-med in college. I studied biology. I was, again, a big fan of evolution. Somewhere in that last couple of years of college, I kind of lost my desire to go to med school, spend another 8 years, learning how to fix people who were broken, and that's fine. I sort of put off med school for a while, and then I put it off and put it off and put it off, and the next thing you know, it's been 40 years, and I put it off this long. However, I look back on what I've done, and the number of people that I feel like I've helped either directly through Mark's Daily Apple or my books, or indirectly through the coaching program, because we have 4,000 plus coaches now, who each of whom has 50 or 100 clients. I feel like I've helped more people achieve their wellness goals and ideals than I ever could have done as a doctor. So, but it was the initial goal of saying, okay, I'm gonna be a coach, and I'm gonna coach athletes, and I'm gonna have 8 athletes, and I'm gonna make a living doing that. And then when I got there, it was like, oh, people are coming up to me and they see what I'm doing with athletes, and I'm not an elite athlete, but I'd like you to coach me like you would an athlete. So then I start coaching people to participate in a local 10K or a marathon or a short triathlon. We do some of that in the gym. Now I'm in the gym training people, and other people come up to me and say, really, I love the way this person that you've been working with for 3 months, they look cut, they look fit, they look happy, they look healthy. Can you do that for me? With no interest in competing in any sort of an event. But just putting it out there, I just brought clients in from sort of all walks of life. And the most interesting part to me was the fact that every person that I coached was individual, was unique, had their own goals, had their own aspirations, had their own backstory, had their own particular situation they were in at the time that they needed to adjust to move closer to their own goals. So it was this ability to kind of pivot, but pivot with a knowledge base that I could use in any situation. Yeah. And that's the most important thing about, I think, the Primal Health Coach Institute, is the information that we learn here applies to anybody of any aptitude or any situation in life with regard to their illness or their desires or their goals or whatever, because all you have to do is sort of look into what's missing in their regimen. What is it that their genes are expecting of them that they're not answering or they're not addressing?
That's what I love about it too, actually. That's what I love about Primal Health Coach Institute, is we're talking about, like I always tell my clients this is pretty black and white. It's evolution, it's human biochemistry. I mean, it's black and white depending on where you land on the believing in evolution spectrum. But and what's really cool is that we have thousands of graduated Primal Health coaches, and every single one of them has a slightly unique business offering, because you can take this fundamental human health concept and apply it in really specific ways. And we actually encourage coaches to do that. And I love how you told your story about you started with the athletes and then people who wanted to be like athletes. And this idea of pivoting is essential, but what is foundational to the ability to pivot is a solid understanding. You have to be really quite smart and educated to know enough to be able to pivot accurately.
Correct. You need to know, sort of where the template is, where the guardrails are. But as long as you know where they are and what you're working with, then there's a real creative aspect to this too. Then you can look at a particular person in a particular situation, and by listening to their story and listening to their concerns and doing a little bit of an audit on what their life looks like and what their diet looks like, start to make some corrections or start to suggest some corrections in there that are life-changing to that person. Whether it's running a 100-meter dash faster or being able to swim at all, and survive, or whether it's in the gym doing, 15 pull-ups, or whether it's on the golf course having a better swing because you're more flexible, whether it's just being able to get out and walk. I mean, so many people are immobile because of arthritis, joint pain, overweight, all sorts of issues that prevent them from this sort of basic enjoyment of life. Well, any of these situations has at its basis some epigenetic causal factor. Now, we're not necessarily going to cure the issue, but we're certainly going to mitigate the symptoms, the pain, the problems.
Yeah, I wonder if epigenetics is going to become more mainstream in other like health coaching educational spheres, because I just think it's so impactful with what we do as Primal Health Coaches. But one thing that we try to teach our coaches, and honestly any health coach should attempt to do this, is understand the concepts of science and behavior change and everything, and then build out a signature program that folds all that you've learned into a methodology of teaching that your ideal client can really hook into. So, like, for example, you built the 21-day total body transformation. Right. That would be like one of your signature methodologies. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of coaches believe that they have to, like a lot of our coaches believe they have to follow in exactly your footsteps and do it the way Mark does it. What would you say to that?
Well, I mean, that's fine. I mean, I made this 21-day total body transformation template with the intent of having every physician in the world use it as a guideline, as a starting point to address the issues that their patients may have. Having said that, there's no magic to 21 days. It could be 7 days. It could be 14. It could be 90 days. And a lot of our coaches within the Primal Health Coach Institute, they have 90-day programs. They have okay, if you're going to work with me, I need a 90-day commitment, and I'll hold your hand. We'll do this together. I'll spend time in person with you. I'll spend time on the phone. We can text back and forth. Other people have sort of a very broad template that they give all their clients, and they say, this is what we're going to be doing, and whether you're with me for 3 days or 3 years, these are the guidelines we're going to use. So I think it's incumbent upon every coach to sort of make it their own. But that was our intent from the beginning, was to give them enough information and enough examples that if they don't want to make it their own, that's fine too.
Yeah, which I think is empowering for somebody aspiring to be a coach, because on one hand, anybody who I think branches into entrepreneurship has something in them, whether it's ever been realized or not, that to create something of their own. Nobody wants to be an entrepreneur and really go out and regurgitate somebody else's material word for word, but it's also nice to have that as a template while you're getting started. So I just think it's and we offer that in the course. We say, here's everything Mark teaches and the way he teaches it, and we also encourage you to create something that's your own, that really speaks what your ideal client needs.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the big areas of opportunity is corporate wellness. We have companies that have a couple of hundred, a couple of thousand employees, and they have no idea how to organize their employees in a way that encourages them to eat better, to move more, to get better sleep, to get out and play a little bit, to do all the things that we assume everyone ought to be doing in some form or another, and in so doing to benefit themselves.
Yeah, it's a huge opportunity. So I'm thinking about what barriers and hurdles aspiring coaches come up against. We hear the same ones all the time, so I'd love to just sort of get your thoughts on it. The first one being money. Not necessarily the investment to buy into an educational system, but I can't leave my job. I can't afford to pack it all in. Who's going to pay the mortgage? Banks don't give away free mortgages just because you're following your passion, so on and so forth, right? I mean, have you ever, what do you say to that? Do you have any thoughts on that?
The number one piece of advice I give anybody, whether they want to be a coach or not, is invest in yourself first. So before you start salting away $10 a week from your paycheck for your old age pension, I think it's much more better in terms of a return on investment to start investing in yourself. Whether that's courses, whether that's marketing yourself, outside to show the world that you have a talent beyond your 9 to 5. So I think a lot of people who have a job who would like to be coaches can be coaches and still keep their job for as long as it takes until they can kind of break free. I mean, I when I was a coach and trainer in the 80s, I had a contracting business, and I wasn't going to give that up. It was too lucrative, but I was having too damn much fun coaching people. My way of coaching in those days, even with non-athletes, was to go on long walks with people and to go on hikes and to go on long bike rides and to work out with them in the gym. So I actually always felt like I was getting paid to train at a low level and train with a friend because my clients became friends. And as most coaches understand, you're at a very intimate level with these people. You're understanding a lot about not just their diet and their workout program, but what goes on in their household and some of their, their background and their upbringing and what what keeps them up at night and things like that. It's a very kind of intimate thing. So I always used to consider myself, okay, I just finished a 2-hour bike ride. There's $200 bills and a great friend who just paid me and felt like he got a tremendous amount out of the ride. So it was, for me, it was a way to build a business so that when I finally left my contracting business and went full-time into coaching, it was a smooth transition. It was easy, and then it was like a piece of cake to build a big clientele. In fact, the next hurdle that I encountered was I had too many clients. Yeah. If I was doing like 22 to 25 trainings a week at $100 an hour in 1986, that was a lot of money in those days. It was a lot of money for training, and I could get that in Los Angeles. But I was making a ton of money, but then I was running out of time. So then I had to figure out how do I leverage my time and keep making the amount of money I'm making and eventually more.
Yeah. Well, I think it's so interesting that you started off by talking about investing in yourself, because it's so wild to me. When I get on the phone with a prospective client, and I describe to them how much the investment is to work with me, they have hesitation. Anybody does when they're putting a substantial amount of money down on anything. But we as coaches can encourage our clients that this is an investment in your health, and the rewards you get from this can't be measured, and yet we hesitate to put money down on ourselves. So it's always interesting to me how the conversation is almost the same between health coaching clients and somebody looking to make some kind of career leap. There's nothing comfortable about change, but the investment in yourself almost always pays off. But I was thinking about when I made the leap from my professional day job. And I think that the whole idea around this language around the leap needs to go away, because not too many people can or will leap. It's actually irresponsible for a lot of people to imagine just leaping into something new. Yeah. I personally
glide into it, right?
Yeah. Well, I did sort of like a mamba. I kind of went forward and back. I tiptoed out of my professional career. I just was a marketing manager, pretty generic career path, office job. I was really done with that. It wasn't lighting me up. It was not a remotely authentic expression of who I was. And it took me until my late 30s to realize that, because in my 20s and early 30s, it was fine.
Sure.
Paycheck. I was climbing the corporate ladder, and that felt important at the time. And then it stopped feeling important. So I went down this path, and I took a little tiptoe out of my corporate career, and then I realized I couldn't do that. So I stayed in it. Like you were saying, I dabbled in both. It took me honestly 3 tries to get out of the corporate world. But it feels like that time has gone by in the blink of an eye. Mm. I feel like I've gone from working a day job that paid the bills but did not mean anything to me to having a successful, thriving, to your point, too busy coaching practice. My coaching practice is too busy as well, like you mentioned. It's like there's absolutely no shortage of clients in the world. In fact, there's a surplus of clients in the world.
For sure.
And so I just, we kind of tiptoed away from money and into now this idea about your responsibility, or how it feels irresponsible to change your trajectory of life. But I think it's irresponsible not to.
That's
sometimes.
A good point. It's irresponsible not to. And the number of people who, I encounter now who said, I remember when you came out with your coaching program, it was 2014. And I'm like, yeah, it was a long time ago. Like, I wish I'd done that. That's the sort of, people say, I wish I'd done it then because now I'd be a coach. Well, it's never too late, but if you don't make that glide, if you don't do that mamba or make the leap, it can be forever, and then you might regret it. And a lot of people come to our program having known about the Primal Blueprint, having read my books, having had great success personally with, getting rid of their IBS or their PCOS or their diabetic meds, losing 40, 50, 105 pounds, feeling better, sleeping better, and they've had these sort of results, and they get really excited about the possibility that they could become a coach, but they're afraid that I never saw myself as a coach. I never saw myself as a teacher, and again, I didn't either. I never really considered myself a coach or a teacher. I was more like a friend facilitator. That was just my mindset. I didn't, it didn't work for me to be a teacher, but it worked for me to be sort of this, a consultant, a friend, a facilitator. I just gave it other terminology.
That's actually such a great point, because I think a lot of folks, when they envision themselves going to practice as a health coach, they're envisioning themselves handing out meal plans and protocols and sort of just being in this kind of master-slave kind of relationship, but it never ever shakes out like that. At least in my opinion, not the good coaching relationships. I refer to my coaching as, it's not a program, it's a relationship. And you touched on this already. I barely talk about food with my clients half the time. We're talking about big things going on in their life that they need help, that they need their health to support them through.
Right.
And I think when I try to describe what health coaching is, I always say, it's one part education, it's one part leadership, and then it's support. But what I almost never say is that it's accountability, which might sound strange, but I think that we need to teach our clients to be accountable to themselves. And I think a lot of coaches get into the trap of thinking that they're going to hold their clients accountable.
It's so funny you say that, because my wife has a client that she's had for 3 years. He's had great success. He calls her once a week for 5 minutes. And all he does is just tell her it's almost like a confessional, or not. Here's what I did great. Here's what I didn't do so great. I know I need to do this. I'll talk to you next week. And it's really, it's pretty funny, because we were driving in Los Angeles the other day, and she forgot, because of the time zone difference, she forgot that it was time for him to call her. And I'm driving, and she's got her phone hooked up to the car, and all of a sudden the call comes in, and it's her client, Bill. And so I listen to the conversation, and it's like, wow, this is pretty cool, because it's all about the accountability, and they've developed such a good relationship, and he knows what to do, right? So now it's just about him checking in with somebody, and I thought, wow, that's another way to do it. If I had 12 clients an hour at 5 minutes each, times 4, hours a day, that'd be 48 clients a day at $50. I mean, it's a lot of, like, there's a business model there. But you have to do the work first, right? You have to spend the time with the client. You can't just out of the blocks do that 5 minute. But that's what it sort of evolved to.
It does, and that's where we go back to the signature program type of deal, because, for example, the program that I take my clients through is 8 weeks long. We have a 30-minute coaching call every week, so that's 4 hours of work, and I charge $1,000 for it. And at this point, everybody who comes through the program has the same questions, the same hurdles, the same struggles. I never get tired of answering these questions. I always get excited to answer them, and I show up for my client with a really open and excited attitude. However, that's not a lot of work.
Yeah.
I'm not pouring a lot of mental energy into this 8-week program. And for me, that hourly wage is pretty sweet. Plus, I get to talk about things I love to talk about every day.
What's funny is it's not a lot of work for you, but it's a lot of information for them. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of value for them. But I mean, it's like, you look at professional athletes, they've trained their whole life to do a 40-yard down and out, or to hit a home run, and it's not a lot of work for them, and they get paid a lot of money for it, and nobody complains about that. So there's value in what people do, and I think in taking this education on and understanding the Primal Blueprint, and understanding ancestral health, and understanding how the keto diet might work for some people, and the autoimmune protocol might work for others, and all of these different variations that you have this knowledge, which you can just pull out and kind of customize for each of your clients. But for them, it's like a whole new world. It's brand new stuff. It's like mind-blowing. It's life-changing. And that's really what it's all about.
Well, even when you're talking about Carrie's client, Bill was on the phone for 5 minutes and probably got tremendous value out of that, and probably said, "Here, take my money." Even though he answered his own question, he's in a place now where he can answer his own question. And this idea of graduating your clients out of your care and into their own intuitive ability to manage their own lives, their own health, is really, I think, fundamental. I think that's what it's about. A lot of coaches
but I mean, that's nothing pisses me off more, I have to say, than seeing somebody at the gym who's had the same coach for 5 years and not gotten any results. It's like, what's that about? I mean, the whole point of this, at least from my perspective, the whole point is to wean your clients off you and to say, okay, here, leave the nest. You're good. Life is going to be wonderful. If you have any questions, call me. But otherwise, we don't need to see each other anymore because you know how to do this. And that's true empowerment, when you can let somebody go and say, there's going to be a point at which you might know more than I know because you're so good at this now and you don't need me anymore.
Well, as a businessman, that raving fans are what get the next clients in the door.
Yeah.
And I don't think you create raving fans by locking somebody in an almost well but not quite finished paradigm. Yeah. So we do want them to get well, and I've gotten more than half of my clients from referrals from clients who are very happy and satisfied, and who honestly will never need my help again, which is great. Right. I don't see that as missed opportunity. I see that as fulfilling my mission.
Sure.
And it has not slowed the stream of clients. But I think what we're talking about right now is that all these clients we have, it was so easy for us, and that can be really overwhelming for somebody who's brand new to this. One common soundbite we hear is coaches who graduate from any program, not just ours. We talk to a lot of coaches all the time, and they'll say, boy, I thought when I got the certification that the clients would just come knocking. All I keep hearing is that we've got this global health crisis, and I got my certificate, and then it's just crickets. Nobody came knocking on my door. Yeah. What do you say to people who say stuff like that?
I spent so much time in Hollywood, and I was an actor at one time, and there are, Hollywood is full of tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of great actors. And there's probably 50 that you know. Mm-hmm. And the rest are really good at what they do, but they're not putting it out there. They're not going out and knocking on the doors. They're not seeing the right people. They're not getting out at the right events. They're not going to the workshops. They're not, involving themselves in local theater and being seen by somebody. So to that, I say, depending on what your domain is, train somebody for free at the gym, and then let other people see you training them. Yeah. And then just say, hey, I like what you're doing. Or look, when I go to the gym, first of all, one of my missions when I go to the gym every day is to meet one new person. And so I meet a lot of people. And just as a side note, one of my goals is to know names, is to remember names. So it gets challenging when you know tens of thousands of people. But the idea that when you go to the gym and you're training somebody and there are other people in the gym, go to the gym at the busiest time of day, mm-hmm. and then kind of meet other people while you're there and look at people who are not necessarily know what they're doing and just say, oh, here's my card. I mean, if I'm training Betty over here, but in the event that you want to have a chat about what we could do together, I'm happy to help. That's one example of 1,000 that you could do, but you got to put yourself out there in order to get noticed and in order to serve the world.
Mark, how do you avoid feeling overwhelmed by the health and fitness market? I know you were a pioneer in it, but imagine if you were getting started today. Imagine you were starting your blog today, and there's 1 million blogs already. I mean, imagine the entire trajectory of your whole business if you were starting it today. How would you approach that?
So I'm on the other side of this. So I am overwhelmed at the amount of opportunity that I see out there. We are in a horrible state as a nation. We have upwards of $2.5–3 trillion a year spent on fixing things that are broken that probably shouldn't be broken because of bad lifestyle choices and and mismanagement and wrong information and so on and so forth. So I'm not overwhelmed at all. I look at this opportunity for a space for health coaches to become that intermediary between the physician and the patient, so that the physician can offload some of the informational aspects of what he's supposed to be doing or she's supposed to be doing to a coach who can then spend quality time with the patient. I think there's a concept of a patient advocate that doesn't exist yet that probably ought to. Somebody who knows enough about what's going on with the healthcare system to be able to work with a patient that's been diagnosed with something and then intervene and on behalf of the patient with the doctor and with the insurance companies. I mean, I see so much opportunity here. I see so many people who have the means and just for some reason can't justify the expense, which in some cases is a few $1,000s a year, to get real quality coaching and completely change their lives around. And these are the same people who, by the way, if you went at the end of the year and you said, okay, let's just add up how much money you spent eating at crappy restaurants last year. And not even like McDonald's and fast food stuff. I'm just saying crappy restaurants, like where the food wasn't that good, but the atmosphere was or whatever. Or people who've sort of spent their money on certain things that gave them immediate pleasure in the short term, but at the end of the day was $3,000 or $4,000 worth of wasted, up in the air, gone forever, never to be recovered money that could now be invested in themselves and give them more energy, more life, better sleep, better relationships probably, more muscle mass, probably make them live longer, reduce their risk for heart disease and cancer, decrease the amount of money they spend on doctors, and all these things that are like, okay, why wouldn't you want that? And yet people don't really, a lot of people haven't, had the wake-up call that so many people have. So some people just wait until they get a bad diagnosis and then they go, oh, now it's time to do this. Well, why do that? So that's my fault and our fault as a profession for not putting that sort of information out there. If people understood that a health coach was sort of on the order of a contractor that's remodeling your bathroom. I mean, you're going to spend $3,000 to retile your bathroom. Why wouldn't you spend $3,000 to remodel your entire lifestyle so that you get rid of that tired look, which is what people say they're remodeling their bathroom for. It's looking tired, and apply that to the rest of your life. So I'm overwhelmed at the amount of opportunity, and I'm someone who I like challenges, and I'm not suggesting you do this right now, but I feel like if you left me off with $1 in my pocket and a decent change of clothing and what I have in my brain, and you said you have to make a living as a coach, in the next couple of weeks and pay for the meals and pay for your, I could make that happen. I really feel quite confident that, and you wouldn't have to know who I was or what my background was, but just with my knowledge base and my enthusiasm for it, I know I could make that happen.
Ooh, okay. I actually believe you, obviously, but with knowledge and enthusiasm comes great power. And anybody who embarks on certifying in a program probably already has enthusiasm, I would imagine, and is gaining the knowledge. But you mentioned the bathroom remodeling analogy was so spot on, because I remember this past summer I spent $1,000 on the gas fitter for a swimming pool, a horse trainer. I probably bought a stupid designer handbag. I'll spend $1,000 on a lot of things. We all will. And for some reason, when it comes to our health care, for some reason or another, we're disinclined. And I say we, I mean culturally, we are a little disinclined to spend money on that. But I actually think that's changing. I feel like I'm seeing that change. I feel like the clients that I have are willing to pay out of pocket for the services that I'm providing because they've tried everything else. They've tried the free health care that we have in Canada. It didn't work. And it's becoming more mainstream to take your health into your own financial hands.
It's more mainstream. You just have to. You have no choice.
Yeah. So this idea around an advocate in the medical system, I think for a lot of coaches, and anytime we talk about the medical system, they get a little nervous because obviously health coaches aren't licensed. Our scope of practice is quite limited, and that is true. But I will tell you, we just came back from the Metabolic Health Summit, a big conference with researchers, clinicians, physicians. Every single one of them is clamoring for health coaches to help enact some of these really essential and fundamental diet, lifestyle, behavior changes that doctors can't and don't have the time to do. I see it coming from both sides. I see the health consumer looking to open their wallet. I see doctors looking to bring in unlicensed professionals who are gifted and educated at behavior change. I just think the time is right.
I think that's one of the greatest potential opportunities nationwide is for coaches to find a physician or 2 or 3 in their local area and work with a physician and offer to be, again, the informational go-between. So the physician has the license and is able to say, look, here's your blood work, here's what I think we need to do, here are the markers we need to see if we can shift through non-medical interventions, non-medicinal, non-drug interventions. So we need to clean up your diet, we need to get you doing a little bit more, maybe heavy lifting and not train so hard or so much in this, whatever it is, for the doctor to take the 7 minutes and download the patient, but then to have the doctor's employee, which is now a coach employed by the medical office, to spend an hour with the patient. Or maybe it's 4 hours over the next week, an hour in the office talking about all the things, maybe handing out the 21-day total body transformation. Maybe it's an hour in the home, cleaning out the pantry, cleaning out the refrigerator. Maybe it's an hour shopping. Here's how we shop the perimeter of the store. Here are the things we don't buy. Here are the things that we're going to kind of focus on. Maybe it's an hour in the gym. Look, here's 5 basic movements that you can do. If you do nothing else but these movements, and if you only do them twice a week, you will be 80% of the way where you need to be in terms of fitness. All these things are so eminently achievable and eminently scalable, but you have to take that first step. And so this notion of the physicians, Al Dannenberg, the periodontist, who was one of our first, health coaches, recognize the importance of this information and a lot of them have shifted their practice to incorporate this. I just found, because I have a cardio issue from 30 years of racing my heart as an elite athlete, so I have a cardiologist who keeps me, in between the guardrails, because sometimes I like to see what I can do. And I tend toward trying to set new records for myself, even at my age. So, but my new cardiologist, he's like 100% aligned with Primal and with Paleo and with Keto. And he's like, let's do this together and let's figure this stuff out. I love that. And I know that if he had a couple of coaches in his office who were also of that same sort of grounding, that same background and understanding, that he's got a very successful practice as it is, but he could leverage that practice even greater.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a massive opportunity, but I also just want to shout out to the private practice, which is what I do, because I think private practice gets lost sometimes in the weeds of folks envisioning these big clinical practices. But the private practice is still alive and well as well. But it's pretty cool that we can imagine a time when sick people could go to the doctor and get actual actionable advice that will help them become well. And I wish I could have helped my mom in that way. She really bought into the medical system, and a lot of people do buy into it. But just that there's a little glimmer of experimentation or something. Maybe it's mistrust, but we don't know what it is. We're not going to come down to doctors, but it's broadening for sure.
Well, having your own practice is still, I think, the sort of the number one goal. That's the entrepreneurial notion of being a coach and a trainer. And as we've talked about many times, the hurdle that you hit when you have too many clients is a good hurdle, because what do? You raise your rates, or you fire some clients, or you hire a new.
I hired a staff.
Hire
that was
staff.
Wild. Yeah.
And you start to scale that thing. Yeah. And there's no reason that a personal health coach couldn't have a staff of 6 and have a physical location where people come in and get their regular updates, their accountability sessions, their informational sessions, and be making literally $250,000 a year. There's no reason that can't be a very legitimate and popular business model.
I completely agree. I completely agree. And I honestly, real talk, didn't think that was possible. I heard platitudes like that. I call them platitudes because in my brain, and I'm a super pragmatic person, probably responsible to a fault. And I'm sure a lot of people listening to this would understand what that's like. We talked about it earlier. Like, I have to have this sensible job, and it's not realistic to make this leap. And I never believed that one could make a lucrative income doing this, but now I am. And it felt like it went by in a flash. It really felt like it went by in a flash. And I know that new coaches starting out, when we say to them, well, just give it 3 years. That's typically the frame of time that we say. If you put in a consistent effort for 3 years, you'll have something big. And when they look at it from the beginning of that timeline, it's like 3 years. I don't have that kind of time. That's forever. Yeah. But when you're looking back 3 years later, it seems like it flew by. And I mean, the momentum has built to the point where it doesn't. I can't see it stopping, which is just exciting. And maybe
so you mean you see it scaling even greater?
Yeah. I really do. To your point, you just mentioned it. I'm at the point where I need to stop taking clients or hire a bunch of people underneath me. Either the business has to stop or I have to grow it or something, because it's become unmanageable in the best possible way.
Well, I mean, if you didn't do anything from here, you would still make a great living for the rest of your life. But that's not why you're here. You're here to grow things. You're here to expand your service to people.
Yeah, and that comes back to programming, which is a big question that people always ask that we already talked about. But because I have a signature program that I developed based on these primal methodologies, it's like your teachings, but kind of different. And I built it. I can teach it to coaches, other people, and bring them on.
And then all you have to do is manage them. Yeah. Managing the clients.
Yeah. But 3 years ago, 5 years ago, when I was tiptoeing, doing my Mamba back and forth out of my day job, I really truly didn't believe that I could be here. And so I just feel like this is a message from the future. Right. Once you're in it, it goes if you're willing to do the work.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.